Counterfeiting is a growing issue globally, which rights holders, national governments, and international organisations have failed to stifle. In this short video presentation, we will be looking at what is the Anti-Counterfeiting Trade Agreement, who are the participating nations, the primary aim of the Anti-Counterfeiting Trade Agreement, specific measures proposed by the Anti-Counterfeiting Trade Agreement, criticisms of the Anti-Counterfeiting Trade Agreement, and why the Anti-Counterfeiting Trade Agreement failed. What is the Anti-Counterfeiting Trade Agreement? The Anti-Counterfeiting Trade Agreement was a multilateral treaty negotiation which looked to standardise and strengthen intellectual property laws globally. Negotiations took place from 2006 to 2010. On October 11, 2011, 8 of the negotiating parties signed the agreement. Which nations participated in the agreement? The following nations participated in the agreement: Australia, Canada, the European Union, Japan, South Korea, Mexico, Morocco, New Zealand, Singapore, Switzerland, and the United States of America. What is the primary purpose of the Anti-Counterfeiting Trade Agreement? The primary purpose of the Anti-Counterfeiting Trade Agreement was to establish the international standards for the enforcement of intellectual property rights, which would more efficiently and effectively target the growing problem of counterfeiting and piracy. Advocates of the Anti-Counterfeiting Trade Agreement said the focus of the new measure is to target commercially oriented counterfeiting and piracy, rather than the activities of common people. What specific measures did the Anti-Counterfeiting Trade Agreement look to introduce? The final version of the Anti-Counterfeiting Trade Agreement contains a variety of provisions, though Chapter 2 of the agreement contains the provisions which detail the measures to be enacted into law in order to combat counterfeiting and piracy. 5 sections are outlined in Chapter 2, which all look to address different areas of counterfeiting and provide different measures to respond to the various issues. Section 1 of the Anti-Counterfeiting Trade Agreement provides general provisions for the enactment of the Anti-Counterfeiting Trade Agreement into domestic law. This section states that laws should be fair and offer protection to rights holders. Section 2 provides provisions for civil enforcement of the Anti-Counterfeiting Trade Agreement. This section looks to provide guidance in relation to matters including the availability of civil procedure for rights holders, injunctions, damages, and the availability of other remedies. Section 3 outlines the border measures the signatory nations should implement to prevent counterfeiting. This section focuses primarily on border control and the prohibition and limitation of the importation of tangible counterfeited products. Section 4 deals with the criminal enforcement provisions. This section includes general intellectual property violations which should be criminalised. It also states penalties should include custodial sentences and monetary damages, which are severe enough to deter potential offenders. Section 5 details the provisions for addressing digital counterfeiting. In this section, only one provision is provided. This states the signatory states will enact laws which target digital pirates and producers of technology which enable digital piracy. Criticisms of the Anti-Counterfeiting Trade Agreement. The Anti-Counterfeiting Trade Agreement has been criticised by a number of opponents. A major criticism was the lack of transparency in negotiation proceedings. Many viewed this as an effort by powerful corporations and lobby groups to control the negotiations, as they have vested interest in strengthening intellectual property laws. Another criticism was the Anti-Counterfeiting Trade Agreement, besides its stated intent, would lead to ordinary people potentially being liable to face criminal penalties if they breached intellectual property legislation. The potential erosion of personal piracy was also seen as a major fault of the Anti-Counterfeiting Trade Agreement, as it required data retention as one of its measures to combat piracy. Why did the Anti-Counterfeiting Trade Agreement fail? Due to the concerns raised by critics, generally most citizens and the majority of the signatory states were against the implementation of the Anti-Counterfeiting Trade Agreement. This led to protests, particularly in the European Union, which led to many signatory states being unable to enact the Anti-Counterfeiting Trade Agreement into domestic law. Japan was the only nation to ratify the Anti-Counterfeiting Trade Agreement, and as such the agreement was inefficient as a global response to the counterfeiting and piracy issue.